And the roundtables are always good, even though roundtables kind of suffer from, hello, yes, I'm from high school, and I have something really important to tell you. You should, make blah, blah, blah. And you're like, your parents shelled out $1,000 for you to be here, kid? Really? But sometimes they're good. But I go to some of the business ones, too, for, like, trying to get my like what are other people thinking in other games. Like I think the biggest thing was there's a lot of people there who like game developers on a whole are very liberal, very progressive. Almost everybody's got, dyed hair and wearing all sorts of crazy stuff. You got the guys on Thursday wearing kilts. They're a very colorful group. And they're also very, like you'd walk in some of the art on the walls that people can go put, it's like, fuck capitalism and all this stuff. And you're like, all right, yeah, a lot of these people are, very much, you put them in front of a commission in 1948 or something, and they're going to get tried as communists. And then you go into the business talks, and like the business talks, especially for mobile and free to play. And you got these guys that are just like min-maxing ad spend and, talking about game economies and all this stuff. And it's just always really funny to see like all the people that are actually working for all these businessmen that run all the businesses. These people working for them have like no idea that like all these businessmen are, doing stuff that's like completely opposite of what values they're trying to show. So it's always like, come on, guys, like you have all these like values of like, we want to be good to people and we want to, socialism and communism and all this other stuff. And then like you do realize you're working for the dude that's literally got like the AI working to steal all the money from all your customers. Like you do realize you're doing that. Like you're working for the Nazis, and you're in the Nazi army, but you don't have skulls on your hats. You've got flowers. Like maybe you should go to some of those business talks instead of some art and creativity ones. You might start asking your boss a few extra questions about what the hell your company does. It's just always funny to see that because people don't seem to realize it. So this will be our last version check. Basically, this thread here needs to check a version file on S3 and then download this stuff. So we'll see if this last version check is greater than our version check time. Alright, so we'll do try load mission. We're going to say last version check is now. This is going to need to be a volatile variable because I'm going to change this from another thread and interrupt this thing. So this one will go public void load missions now. So we're going to say last version check equals 0L and then wthread.interrupt in thread. Hello, F. Willer. I do not believe I have seen you in chat before. Welcome. I'm just working on, I've got a mission system for the game, and we're dynamically driving those missions by data that's located in S3. And it needs to be, missions need to be validated by our backend platform and by our clients and everything. So I've got like these data on S3, backend server needs to load from there, and the game clients will load from the backend servers. So I'm just writing the caching layer on the those things. Yeah, the talks are always really crazy about, and they've progressively gone in this direction where free-to-play games are no longer, like especially in mobile, the next generation of free-to-play games is not even... It's not even driven by like human intelligence in a lot of ways. Like, you know, you've seen the South Park episode about the Canadian devil Beelzebub, and you know how free-to-play games basically are just Skinner boxes that, you know, give you a false sense of accomplishment and steal money in very psychologically damaging ways for users. And we've gone even farther than that. The industry now is, they've got all the KPIs, they've got all their key performance indicators set up with all their telemetry, and they know the standard hooks for everything now. And they feed all this telemetry data into your machine learning algorithms and your neural nets, and they've got the numbers that show what works and what doesn't. So no longer are you going to a businessman, at least for mobile and free-to-play, and saying, hey, I've got this great idea. There's this cool product. We're going to have all this working. They'll be like, all right, cool. So we'll give you, you know, like a team, and we'll like soft launch you over into Indonesia or some other, you know, like low pay area that's small. And then we'll, you know, run the neural nets and everything else, and if it works, we'll do your game. And it has nothing to do with like player passion or creating a good product or anything like that. It's literally the AI says it'll work. So it's real interesting to see that coming out there, because the industry is definitely in a position where in mobile games the soul is gone. Like the big actual like machines have taken over there. And if that leaks over into premium games, then, you know, you're not gonna be like having a passionate game designer do something. But there's also an argument that works for mobile, because mobile games, you know, you can go make one in 6 months or something like that. So your employer attrition doesn't really factor in too much. People will stick around for 6 months even if they hate their job and their boss. But for a long-term premium project that might span 5 years, employee attrition and morale is much more relevant. So you kind of need to get... It's not just about sales, it's about also having people passionate about their work. So we'll see. There's a few walls in the industry preventing the AI from taking over premium stuff. But it's got to stay premium, and the projects need to be longer than you'd have people going like, hey, wait a minute. I just realized I spent the last, 2 years of my life working on something that's going to just, steal grandma's wallet. What the hell's wrong with me? The mobile soul has been gone since its inception. It's true, but it used to at least be people arguing over numbers, as opposed to just like basically a faceless machine that says if you're going to be funded or not. Usually it's been a faceless person. Mobile games, Nintendo Game Boy. Well, those are just portable console games. I'm more talking phone. Okay, so for us to try to load missions, we're going to need a few things. So we're going to need our... I should get back to work here. We need our S3. So this is going to be in our configs, which I closed. I don't know, it's always just interesting to me to go look at those things and see that massive disconnect of there's a lot of people with certain values in the industry, and then they're completely out of touch with how the industry actually operates, because it'd be nice if people understood their business a little bit more. They might stop making stupid decisions. Alright, so go ahead and make our S3 stuff. So what we're going to do here is check our version. So we need our bucket, and we'll need our path. So this will be get string, services, missions, S3 root. Services, missions, S3 bucket. An iPhone is more powerful than Game Boy by far. You spent 200 hours each game you played back then. iPhones, you get like 10 minutes. Yeah, definitely. Different demographics. Because the games like that I had on Game Boy, like I had, you know, the Legend of Zelda game on there, with the Windfish and all that, which was awesome. I had like Wario Land, which was incredibly hard at the end, especially. And you just played the hell out of those games. Alright, so we got our bucket and our path. We're going to need our version, file name, services, missions, version file. Okay, so let's go grab it. So ms3.file exists. Actually, let's just do a download file. Is it download object? Yeah, download object as string. So we'll do bucket, and then let's do path plus the version file name. So if this is null, we're just going to return false and log a warning. Otherwise, we'll try to get this from JSON string, so version stir, and that's going to be this version data file. It's unfortunate they're different. They shouldn't be different. Well, the problem is, you know, when the market is so incredibly, like, it's not very well locked down for mobile. You know, there's a lot of fraud. Okay, so we should have our previous version of this data file, right? So why don't we do that? Okay, so if this does not equal null, then we're going to say if okay, so if the version numbers match, we'll return. Otherwise, what we want to do is version numbers didn't match, or don't exist, or we haven't loaded yet. I don't know. I don't know enough about mobile games and the market for them to really give anything specific, but it kind of suffers from the problem of too much noise and too little. You know, if you release something on mobile, you're gonna get like, and you're successful. There's gonna be 20 clones that all pop up, and it's like, Jesus. What are you supposed to do? There's no protection for your producers. I think the only way the game companies can kind of win in the end is to, because if mobile games are raced to the bottom, is just to go straight to the bottom. Release free mobile games which tie into larger products and just drop the floor out of the mobile companies. That's the only way the industry is going to save itself from the schism that's already forming. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to download the actual thing. So we want the data file name. One other thing that was really kind of funny at GDC was in the microtalks, one lady was talking about how we need more games in the industry that revolve around sex and erotica and stuff like that. You know, it's interesting. You know, the person shows, how come with books and movies we can have 50 Shades of Grey out there, but if we did that in a game, we would be completely railroaded, and our industry would be, our industry is already blamed for everything. We'd be blamed for global warming if we could. We're already blamed for all the school shootings and for, the degeneracy of youth and for, just whatever, unemployment. It's all video games and people wasting their time. Be like, well, that's not true. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, all right, so if we mainstream erotica games, then we're fucked. We already have. Why don't we have a talk about how to fix the public perception of the game industry as opposed to this crap? Yeah, you'd pay for a good mobile game, and then you'd actually play it. It's difficult to make a game for touch. It can be difficult to make a game for touch. I've seen a lot of games that do it right, because it's usually make it simpler. I think one of my favorite ideas there was a kind of an airport simulator where you have to drag the flight path for the incoming airplanes so they don't run into each other. Stuff like that's pretty cool, but it also doesn't hold your attention for super long. There's only so much you can do with a touchscreen and skill. With a controller, you can, a first-person shooter, you can play that for 20 years and, you can always get better at aiming and stuff like that. But on a touchscreen, it's kind of an inferior control scheme. It's you can tap on stuff as fast as physically possible, and then there's a lot of variation of the size of your thumbs or the size of your fingers, and it's not as consistent. Alright, so this is going to be path plus the data file name. Yeah, that whole oh, we should have more, porn games or something it's just really funny that, there's that sort of voice in the industry. and in a very mainstream form at a dev talk. It's yeah. Come on, guys. This is just a red herring. We don't need to copy these other industries. And oh no, it's unfair. The market's unfair. We're judged, we're judged unfairly. It'd be yeah, that's every frickin' medium that comes out forever. Oh no, TV's come out, it'll rot your brain. Don't stand too close to it, Jimmy. To, you know, it's completely socially acceptable now to binge watch, you know, an entire season of a TV show on the weekend, and that's just normal. You know, like, you don't have politicians say, that damn Netflix, it's stealing our youth, it's destroying their minds. We need to, like, ban Bob's Burgers and The Simpsons. Or, like, even, there's all stuff like Harry Potter is witchcraft and should be banned from everywhere. I don't want my tax dollars going to a school program where they have Harry Potter books on for like a reading list. You know, get that crap out of here. It's always funny how all that works. Alright, so we have our zip mission data, so what we need to do is unzip it. So let's go to our zip util, let's gunzip this stuff. And is this an exception thrower or not? Yes, it is. And I do not program stuff how Java people throw stuff, program stuff. Notice I'm doing like try catch with generic exceptions, and I'm not throwing any exceptions myself. I really have it locked down to like just return codes and everything else, and that's kind of one of the things with server development. Do one or the other, don't mix them. And I won't say like either way is wrong or not. I just feel that like the return code sort of patterns really help enforce the contract of don't throw a goddamn exception, and the generic exception handling will actually like catch everything that people don't actually declare. So kind of program towards the most idiotic thing. You know, don't assume anything in here is written properly. You know, and this is just, in my opinion, a safer way to write stuff. But as with all things, safer is not always better. Safer sometimes mean you'll have a system running and continuing to run that should explode and die horribly. So why don't we just have an actual mission data file as our thing here. Alright, so we get our string. Cannot convert from byte array to string. Well, it's going to be a new string, and it's going to be UTF-8. Okay, so we now have our mission data and our stuff. So what we want to do is make a hash map of our mission data names to whatever. And that's another thing here. I should actually enforce some of this in our deployment tool. What we should do here is in our mission data. Yeah, so add our missions, and we should have a Alright, so we'll throw exceptions on duplicate mission names on our deployment. And we'll do the same thing here. So string to our game mission. So I'll have our mission map. I'll also have our array list of game missions. Alright, so we're going to go through every game mission in our mission data. So the add-all probably iterates over everything, so we might as well just whatever. It's the fucking backend server and a cache thread. We don't need to be sticklers on everything. Alright, so we've got our mission map, we've got our stuff. Now we need to set all of our data for ourselves. So these volatile variables, we'll just set them all in order. So our zip mission data is just going to be zipped mission data. Missions will be missions, and our mission map will be our mission map. And we need to have, we have our cur version file. It needs to be set to our version file. So it's going to be dat. Yeah. So let's go ahead and log this out. Loaded up mission data for version. And let's just set it afterwards. Let's get this version with, and let's print out the number of missions. With blarg missions. Excellent, so that's our mission cache. And we're going to want to let's make some accessor functions here. Mission map. Let's also have a get mission by name. There we go. So it should have no more warnings. Very good, no more warnings. Alright, so we got that. I need to do my registers. So register and unregister. So register and unregister. Let's get it going. Alright, so we have all that going on there, and let's go to our static accessors to be missions, cache, get missions. If I wanted to define a structure and do the same operation on every pointer within the structure, recursing to substructures, would you use a generator? So you want to define a structure and do the same operation on every pointer within the structure. Would I use a code generator for that, is what you're saying? Like, would I define the object and then go generate code for that? I guess I'm not really understanding it super well then, because if you have a structure and you have you've got a whole bunch of data structures inside of that, are those data structures other types? Because the reason I usually use code generation stuff is because when you start writing large generic systems, you end up with very large generic systems, which can be, the side effects of changing something can be very difficult to test. They're all different types. So yeah, one reason is because there's like a whole bunch of stuff and you don't want everything going through the same, like, you know, generic system, because you change one thing and then it like breaks something else or whatever. Another reason is to have, you know, nice static compile time checking for a whole bunch of code that's all the same. And the third reason is because you're doing a bunch of data transformations, like you're trying to take all this data from here and put it over there, and they don't really like to talk to each other, so we have a transmoogling stage, you know, like a serialization layer where it's like, okay, you know, integers need to be packed in these 4 bytes and just, you know, generate the thing that does it. So if you're doing an operation that's kind of like a transmoogle step and you have nice well-defined types and you want it nicely set up so you don't have to go type all that crap out every time and like accidentally miss something, yeah, a code generation system will do real well for that. Especially if not all of those are real objects, because otherwise you could have like a serializable object type that has a thing that operates on some generic big-ass data structure. But you end up running into problems with generic big-ass structures where they just get complicated and stupid, and it's like, well, why do we have this overridden function? Or it's like, well, because in this one case with arrays of this complex object type, we have to pass in the class for that, and then you're just like, ah, Jesus Christ, so now everything sucks? Yeah, pretty much. So it can help with that sort of stuff where it doesn't make everything suck. It keeps the suck in a local context so that it just kind of sucks right there as opposed to sucking everywhere, which is usually preferable. Okay, so we need to add this cache to everything. So we need missions, and then we need to have like, yeah, missions needs to be enabled or not. And prod. Alright, so we got those guys rolling along. Yeah, for serialization, serialization I think is the classic example where code generation performs at its absolute best. Okay, so we've got our missions cache, and that should be enabled and working now. So the next thing we need to do is for our topic subscriber, that thing needs to perform operations. So where the hell did that go? We have broadcast messaging. So handle game message. Broadcast message, handle product updated. Okay, so here's our switch on our types. So we need our next type. This will be missions updated. Handle missions updated. And this is a updated flag. Just using structures, you don't use any major features above C++11. Yeah, if you're doing serialization, also just code generation is not something that was ever taught to me in college or anything like that. So if you've never done code generation stuff before, I would definitely recommend just taking your time and messing around with it and having fun. Because being able to take a system and make kind of a complicated, you know, like marked up thing like this and actually be able to read it is not easy for a lot of people, because you gotta use like a whole bunch of loops and macros and horse shit everywhere with kind of that, and you'll find that all over useful. Well, with code generation, I've done kind of all the different flavors, I think. Like, at Molten Games, we used, well, even going farther back, at EA2D, we used JSP pages and stuff like that for web page generation. And that was basically Java, JSP stuff, where you can mix code and web pages together. And that kind of sucked. It was kind of stupid. And it only worked for web pages. At Molten Games, we used a code generation. We custom made a Python code generator, which is really not that hard to do, because you can just use Python to evaluate more Python. So your generation language is really just Python. So you're just like, you know, doing tokens and just running whatever Python code's inside of there and replacing that text with the output. And that works pretty well and allows a lot of side effects, like setting variables and accessing them later and all that good stuff. At Amazon, I used Jinja 2, which is a Python code generation. Well, it's a Python generation library, and it worked all right. The big problem was Jinja had some rules in there where they didn't want you executing code, and they're like, no, your code and your templates should be totally separate and never together. And that kind of threw some wrenches where it was like, okay, I get it, but in this specific case, that's a giant pain in the ass. I've tried JavaScript-based code generators, where you basically have like a JavaScript-based code generation thing. That went okay. The problem with a lot of the script-based code generators was your typing went all straight to hell after a while. Your code generation system got a little bit unmaintainable. So for this project, I'm using a Java-based code generation system with FreeMarker. And it really doesn't matter what templating language you use, if it's like Jinja, Markup, or your own, but it really matters what your code generator is written in. Because what I found was, with an untyped language for the code generator, such as JavaScript or Python, you end up with kind of a mess that's hard to change, because nothing's statically typed and you have no warnings and compile errors. Your templates will be fucked up after that. But if it's like a Java-based or C# or something else to keep everything reference checked, that is your code generation base, works real well. So I would recommend, I think FreeMarker was really good for that in Java, and Jinja was a little bit too nasty, kind of well, not nasty, but it works. But I didn't like some of the edge cases where it was you can't execute that. Like, you can't just put inline code blocks. And sometimes you want to. Especially if, like, your templating's taking too long. Or you want your templates to do more specific deep checking. Like, if inside of your template you're like, okay, just call this function off in real code that's going to do a whole bunch of shit for us and call a database. Like, just do that. Like, it needs to happen. Alright, so called when a mission update message comes from our queue. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, I think it's WD, is it dash server globals, get missions. Where's our bust? Load missions now, and let's just do our message dot version. And let's actually call this different. It'll be like load if different version, and we'll pass in a version. So let's see. If we have a volatile variable here, so what we're going to want to do is snag this guy. And if those don't match, we will go ahead and call load mission now. So we want load if different version to be our thing. So load if different version. Excellent. Python and FreeMarker. If you're going to be using Python, I don't know if FreeMarker has stuff in Python. Let me check. Does it have anything? Jython wrapper for no. Like, if you're going to do Python, just use Jinja2. It's not awful. Like, it does work. It's just if you're in a more larger project, you might run into edges that are stupid. But if you're doing Python, do Jinja2 would be my. It would be Python and Jinja2, or like Java and FreeMarker for your generation systems. Because for a generation system, it's not just the language of the templating stuff, which would be Jinja2 or FreeMarker. It's also stuff that you put together, such as, you know, I've got like all these different type lookups for the language you're generating for, so that inside of templates I can replace variables with you know, nicely cached types, so I don't have to write completely crazy code all the time. Let me see if I can find a good example. So, like, a good example here is, so it's like for every variable inside of an object, I've got all this, like, if the variable is a primitive and all this sort of stuff. But I'm basically calling into, a good example is, this is the declaration line. So you can see this is actually really easy to write in your template. And it's because this s.getDeclaration, this is an actual Java function I wrote, which goes and like figures all this crap out using like a type lookup dictionary and a context. So otherwise, every one of my templates is going to have like this massive amount of like, if this is, you know, kind of like these, if this variable is a primitive, of this type, and if it has all these special cases, then do all that stuff. So I kind of try to move some of that heavy lifting, real special case stuff used all over the place out into kind of the templating engineering, not like Jinja or FreeMarker, but like Python or Java or C# or whatever. Anyway, I don't know how much that makes sense until you actually go screw with it. So we got all that running. What I'd like to do now is actually make sure that I'm loading the mission data properly. So let's boot up our mission, our server locally, which won't work because I need to run our database. Current version is 3, and we should have 2 missions. One of them actually with decent data. So we got test mission with our stage, which is score 5 goals, and we've got our result tiers all over the place with all this sort of stuff. Excellent. Zip data is this guy. Our missions is this. Mission map has 2 of those guys. Okay, so it's looking like everything is set up properly. Creating new intervals. Very good. So that's all set up. We now have our entire infrastructure set up for caching mission data on all of our servers. Yeah, I found that the Python script that evaluated Python inside of like the special markup layers was much more powerful than Jinja and other things like that. The problem we would run into with that is that our templates started to look real stupid in order to generate readable code. So when you write a template, usually the templating language will remove stuff for your markup and kind of format stuff in a semi-intelligent way. It'll try to like clean up basic crap. Like if you have an if block, it'll try to format it properly. And our like custom-made Python stuff didn't do that, so it's kind of stupid. It would look stupid when we were, it would either look stupid once it was generated, or it would look stupid inside of the template itself that we wrote. So one way to get around that, though, is to then, after you've generated a template file, just run that through some like post-process, syntax formatter, some auto formatter for your own stuff, and then you don't have to worry about that. So if you go that route, do the auto format. We did run into some problems with auto formatting language stuff actually taking longer than you'd expect. So like the generation step for the code right now takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, under right around 11 seconds to do the whole thing. And if we run it twice or whatever, it's that's the whole test, and that needs to be real fast for code generation to work properly. But what we're finding with like auto formatting with Clang and crap like that is that it just took forever. It literally took another 30 seconds, and I was just like, get rid of this crap. I can't do it. We can't format these like 500 files fast enough for this generation system to be worth it. So there's a lot more than just getting it working for a good code generation system. I mean, it's also the guy who went and wrote that post processor for format was using Clang and other stuff, and the guy was a real disagreeable pile of shit, and I don't like him. And I think part of it was he was just being a douchebag. So that whole thing of like the post processor taking too long. Like, I basically just, like, when he presented that, I was just like, so that 30 seconds actually matters, and we're not going to use anything you write if that's what it does. So I don't know. I feels bad. Well, I mean, you know, some people are just assholes, and some people, like, some people are jerks. Like, I'm definitely not a nice person, like, overall, but in a professional setting, I'm not just, like, gonna stab you in the back for no reason, you know. But there are people who just, they want to control things, and they don't really, like, if you're going to control things, at least be proactive in it. Such as, a good example is, I would bitch all the time about how our release process was total shit at Amazon and how we were screwing everything up. So eventually the manager just comes to me and is like, hey, you're always bitching about this, you know what, it's now your damn problem, like, you're in charge of the deployments. And I was like, great, here's the plan, this is how we're going to do it, and then, did the whole thing. And there are people who want to control things but don't want to do it themselves, right? So they'll be all bitching about everything all the time. And then you're like, okay, cool. Okay, well, why don't you be in charge of it? Oh, no, that's not my job. You're like, well, then shut the fuck up, buddy. Get out of here. Like, okay, you're just a negative Nancy. I get it, but you can disagree with the guy building the bridge, but if you're not going to go out there and build it, then leave him the hell alone. So we've got that. Okay, we're going to now need the actual calls to fetch the mission data from the servers. So let's go to our services, definitions, services. Do we have missions? We have stats and we have social. We do not have a missions or a game information. We have an info service somewhere here. What's it got? We've got get service info. The info service is not that, though. The info service is like a different sort of monster. So I think what we need to do is we need to make a new service. So let's go ahead and clone the stats. No, social service is the last one we made, so we'll just copy that guy, and we'll make a game data service. Okay, so the question is, should the response contain the zipped data or not? So I need to go look and see if we have a gzip in here. Anywhere in Unreal, or if I just shouldn't deal with it. And this is all trash. Let's just Google it. Alright, save system, read and write. Let's see, GZ. No, that's not worth it. So they have a third-party zlib thing here. Yeah. So Unreal does have zlib, but I'm not really sure if that's useful. Like, if it's actually available in... Like, we have this third party, we have zlib. Is it actually used? build epic txt. Like, we have the source for it. We've got, it looks like it might be available on all the different platforms. Like, we've got Windows, we've got iOS, but is that Mac? I mean, we have it on Linux. Well, I don't really want to learn all this trash. So what would be a... I'll just Google a few more times and just do gzip, Unreal, C++. Why does F compression not support gzip? Well, that's relevant to this conversation. We're working on a project that has received custom compressed messages over the network in gzip format. Why is the implementation of F compression incomplete in that it supports compressing to gzip but not decompressing from gzip? Oh, what the fuck? Alright, so there's F compression. Alright, so F compression, let's read. Compressed thread safe, abstract, compression routine, uncompressed memory, thread safe, abstract, decompression routine. Alright, so we have our buffers and our bit window, uncompressed memory for compressed stuff, true if succeeds. Okay, what's our compression flags? We have compress gzip. Alright. So what we're going to look for is this compress gzip flag in our code base. So this is in compressed memory. So what are we looking for? We're looking for uncompressed memory. Uncompressed memory. Make sure a valid compression scheme was provided. So if flags and compress zlib. Okay, so it literally only supports zlib for uncompress, for decompressing data. There has to be a reason for this. Like, I can't imagine that they would just like not implement gzip for no damn reason. Because it's real easy just to like slap it in here. It's bytes to bytes. You know, gzip is one of the easiest things ever to implement. So if they don't have it automatically, then... So the question is, can we do zlib in Java? Alright, zlib is a re-implementation of zlib in Java. The first and final aim of hacking this is pack compression to support pure Java SSH. Zlib is designed to be free. Zlib can inflate data. Let me see. What does it use? What do we need? So what does this guy got? Like, we got jcraft in here. The licenses. LGPL. But that's under jzlib is under BSD. You know, I don't want to do this right now. I don't want to go implement a whole new jzlib and look up licenses and do all this crap just for something that may not be an issue, which is just downloading the game data stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have the game data be just data. So get mission data is just going to return a